IBO World Champion, La Bella Bestia, coming to you to show my appreciation for the ring IQ. So if you haven't already,
get guard, but
wow,
Howard,
look at the strength.
follow and subscribe Ring IQ and check out the relay where they cover today's top boxing news.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this. Well, Melissa Odessa posted this very lengthy comment online by way of her Instagram account, and it reads, "You want to know why I'm not in the boxing mix? Why I can't take any fights? Ask Gluis Online, head of Signature Punch Boxing Promotions, who refuses to release me from my exclusive promotional contract. I believed in this man and his lies. This man's business practice is not always ethical, and I will not do further business with a lying, manipulative, and toxic promoter like Gary Lewis and his tantrum-throwing wife, Jody. I still haven't received my full agreed-upon pay from my June 19th fight. Nelson Lopez Jr. posted that he signed me as a manager, but never did. I went along to get burned. Check BoxRec. I will not be fighting for or representing Signature Punch Promotions. I'm not going to spend my savings on an attorney and legal fees, so I stop here. With that said, I am officially retiring and moving on from boxing. Boxing goes on with or without me. No point if I can't stay busy. It hurts to have fallen back in love with something I'm so passionate about to have to walk away." You know, I actually had the opportunity to talk to Melissa Odessa directly here on the channel about just this situation. You know, why she's not fighting, what's going on, and how it seems that Gary Lewis is holding her career for ransom.
Which is pretty unethical.
Unethical because Melissa Odessa, she's a recent signee. She hasn't been with Signature Punch all that long. She's only fought once under the promotional banner, and I don't see why, if her and Gary aren't seeing eye to eye, he can't just cut her loose, release her, let her go about her own way, go about her own business, and see if she can't find some other promotional outfit to work with. I don't see what Gary Lewis gains.
What does he gain out of shelving her?
This is a recent signee we're talking about. This isn't someone that's pivotal to Signature Punch's bottom line, not one of their money makers per se. She hasn't been with the promotional outfit all that long. And if there's some kind of a discrepancy, some kind of an issue, I don't see why Gary can't just terminate the contract and let her go. And there's been an outpouring of sympathy from Melissa Odessa's contemporaries who hope to help her find solutions to just this issue.
I mean, I really hope they can help her.
Because she's fought too talented a boxer to fall through the cracks like this. Marine Corps veteran, comes from a mixed martial arts and boxing background.
She's a very combat proficient fighter.
With a fan-friendly style, lots of personality, and it would be a pity, a great pity,
if this is how her career ends.
her boxing career anyways. She does come from a mixed martial arts background. She's not one of these fighters that all of a sudden decided to take up mixed martial arts after
Having spent years in pro boxing.
she actually has mixed martial arts to fall back on, and, you know, that might be the case if something dramatic doesn't happen, if something doesn't change. I hope that a solution can be reached. Hell, I hope Gary Lewis can find it within his own self, find it in his conscience to just cut her loose, let her go.
He gains nothing holding her career for ransom like this.
It's a very spiteful way to do business, and the more exposure this situation receives, the more of a bad reputation he develops as a businessman and a promoter, someone to stay away from, far away from.
I just hope Melissa can find a way out of that contract.
Like Gary Lewis can just cut her loose, let her go.
No shortage of slime balls in the sport of boxing.
On a less somber note, Steffi Bull took to social media and posted this. Number 1 versus number 5, November unification, hinting at the potential ring return of none other than the WBC Super Featherweight Champion Terry Harper against Choi, the reigning WBA Super Featherweight Champion. Ballsy move if Terry decides to take Choi head on right after the injury and the surgery. You know, Terry suffered a refracture to her right hand, her previously injured right hand.
And what was her final spar?
Heading into what was supposed to be the Choi fight back in May. And I think that, you know, if they're going to take on Choi in November, if they're going to take her on straight away, I guess it's because they don't want to lose any time taking any tune-up or tick-over fights. That is one way to interpret it, if they take the fight head-on straight away. If that's the way it happens, that will be the second unification match set to go down this fall before this year is out in the women's super featherweight division. We know that Maiva Hamadouche and Michaela Mayer, they're supposed to be fighting this fall. And if this fight comes off, that sets up a potential undisputed super featherweight title fight for early next year in 2022. And if it happens this way, this will be Terry's first ring appearance this year, having already been sidetracked with this nagging injury. This will be her first fight since November of last year when she stopped Norway's own Katharina Thanders, the then unbeaten Katharina Thanders.
Basically a year.
You know, last month news broke that Choi wasn't going to wait for Terry to return to action. She's supposed to be fighting Ida Soledad Matisse in South Korea later on this month on the 28th.
Well, keep busy fight.
It's actually a little more than just a keep busy fight, as Ida Soledad Matisse, you know, she gave Eva Brotnicka, back when Eva was a champion, she gave Eva all she could handle over there in Poland. Something similar could apply here with Choi, who's looking to have a fight before she goes into that November unification match.
So we got that to look forward to.
2 potential unification matches in the women's super featherweight division set to cap this year off, and that sets everything up. That sets the stage for the undisputed title fight next year. Let's hope it happens that way. In other news, Sean Gibbons posted this image via his Instagram account now that the Casimero versus Rigondeaux track meet is behind us. It seems that John, they're going to set their sights on the other 2 champions remaining in this division, Nonito Donaire,
John Riel very recently had a falling out with.
and Naoya Inoue. And, you know, John Riel might have won the fight, quote-unquote won the fight. He might have been able to hang on to his title by way of the judge's decision. I myself don't actually feel that anyone won that fight. I don't feel either man beat the man opposite the ring. I think that both men lost, if anything. That fight hurt the both of their stock, and even those in attendance lost for having to witness it.
Fight like that gives the whole sport a black eye.
Guillermo Rigondeaux, he's been taking most of the heat for how that fight looked. He's been taking most of the blame for the fight's aesthetic. But John Riel, he had his role to play in all of that too. You know, John Riel's inability to cut off the ring, pin Guillermo Rigondeaux down, force him to fight, force him to trade. That has as much to do with how that fight looked as Guillermo Rigondeaux's fancy feet.
You know, he got to keep the title.
And the question is, what does John Riel Casimero do now, since there are no other champions on PBC's Isolation Island with him?
If Donaire and Inoue have a rematch.
That's a very palpable probability, very palpable possibility. If a rematch takes place in the fall between Naoya Inoue and Nonito Donaire, where does that leave John Riel Casimero? Will John Riel be allowed to cross the street in order to face the winner of that fight, who a lot of people think is going to be Naoya Inoue, that he might win even more decisively in a second fight with Nonito than he did in the first.
Does Casimero fight him afterwards?
And I'm going to be fair. I'm going to be even tempered about this, because Naoya Inoue and John Riel Casimero were supposed to fight last year, but in the thick of the pandemic, the investors pulled out and the money just wasn't there to do that fight.
That's the story.
Sean Gibbons is going to tell it the way that he wants to tell it, and he'll post memes on his Instagram account implying that Naoya Inoue is running from the fight, when in reality, that's what happened at a fight last year. The investors pulled out.
And you jumped into bed with the PBC.
Further complicating the situation, because in that situation, the better course of action would have been to jump into bed with Top Rank. Stay with Top Rank long enough that the situation with the pandemic stabilizes and you can finally get around to doing that fight. It's not what's dead. Once again, I'm going to be fair. I'm going to be even tempered. It's just as much on Hideyuki Ohashi and Bob Arum to do this fight as it is on John Riel Casimero and Sean Gibbons. It takes 2 to tango. They can do this fight abroad, or they can do this fight right here. They can do it in Japan, or they can do it in the United States. Because Naoya Inoue is the cash cow of the Bantamweight division, any way you slice it. And he's co-promoted by both Bob Arum here in America and Hideyuki Ohashi over there in Japan.
Question is John Riel willing to cross over?
Because we know Al Heyman's got a reputation for keeping his boys on a short leash.
And their bank accounts.
Apparently, Gervonta Davis is in a hole 40 G's to all-star cars, and they're not being quiet about it. They got a big old billboard on the side of a truck letting everybody know Gervonta Davis.
He's in the hole for 40,000.
You know, this brings to mind that previous story we talked about here on the channel in reference to Adrian Broner being on some kind of a weekly allowance from Al Heyman. Something like $1,000, $2,000 a week.
I wonder if that don't apply to Gervonta as well.
Because it might. You gotta think about it. Adrian Broner's a fighter that's been in there with Marcos Maidana, Sean Porter, Mikey Garcia, and Manny Pacquiao, a former 4-division champion who here today...
He ain't got full access to his own money.
Al Heyman's got him on some kind of a weekly allowance. So if a guy like Broner, who's in the latter stages of his career, and he's already been there and done that with some very formidable fighters. If a guy like that don't have full access to his own money, it's possible that Gervonta Davis don't got access to all his money either.
That would explain this outstanding debt.
We know that over time, Adrian Bronier, he's had some outstanding debts of his own. Bills that weren't paid, things like that. And that's what we're seeing here with Gervonta Davis. You wouldn't think that on the heels of his big pay-per-view fight, not but a few weeks later, some car dealership is saying he's in the hole 40 G's. He should have the 40 G's to pay them.
In theory.
It seems like Uncle Allie keeps these fighters on a very short leash, and their bank accounts as well. I don't know, maybe if Gervonta Davis remembers to do the dishes and take out the trash, Uncle Al will throw him a few dollars.
Is that any way for a grown man to handle his finances?
Having to go through his advisor for what's supposed to be his money. There's a very strange, fishy situation going on over there on PBC's Isolation Island, and I've said it for a long time.
It's like those guys over there signing over their souls.
Signing over their freedom. They don't have the legal liberty to pursue endeavors off of PBC's Isolation Island, and they don't even have the legal liberty to handle their own finances. In this instance, pay off their own fucking debts.
This is embarrassing.
Like in the olden days when cashiers used to plaster bounce checks to the teller window.
Tell your business, why don't you?
I don't know, maybe by the time this video is uploaded, the debt will be paid in full, as most things are handled remotely these days, and if you got the scratch, if you got the cash, you can pay this thing remotely. I don't think Gervonta Davis likes it none too much, having his face posted to a side of a truck, airing out his dirty laundry, airing out all his business like this.
You know, yesterday you were talking about...
I spoke about it. Listen, Errol Spence is one of the top 3 hottest fighters, higher up in that top 3, depending on who you ask and talk to. I said my suspicions and my reason, being in the game so long, not surprised by any shenanigans that might happen, alleged, true, or in between. Maybe, maybe not. But I questioned the week before. Show me a sparring tape. Show me something that created this episode, this particular conversation that we're having. Because I'm getting asked questions from fighters from different parts of the East Coast, traveled the West Coast recently before I got here. And the first thing people ask me, what do you think happened? And week before and blah, blah, blah. I said, listen, do it falls on a smell test? But I don't want to be the first one, which I believe I was, to speak candidly about it and straight up, because I like to give fans who I think is very intelligent, but also there's some potential hoodwinks or already got hoodwinked slow learners out there. So I'm educating them in the same token, letting them know that everything don't have to be what's fed to you, what it is. Something to think about. And if something come out of that conversation where now you're getting information more than whatever Band-Aid or bandage, whatever showed, whatever, then you make your decisions and then you follow it from there. But I'm a person about, we gotta go further if it means that much to anybody in any situation. If you tell me something, now you gotta show me. I think the fans in the world deserve, not because of missing basically almost 90% of boxing last year, correct?
Yeah, a lot.
And now
During the pandemic.
You got your, can you imagine, I heard this happen to you allegedly. The date didn't show up because you was ready and you was all dressed up. I heard had a nice haircut, smiling. And next thing you know, you got stood up. This is a stood up in boxing.
What Bernard Hopkins is saying here isn't at all far-fetched, because he's been in this business long enough that he doesn't take everything at face value. And that's not just a good way to approach boxing, that's a very good way to approach life. Don't believe everything you read. He's been around long enough, inside and outside of those ropes, that he demands a little bit more information before he goes believing in something or repeating something. Listen, there are a lot of people out there that are very skeptical when it comes to this Errol Spence eye situation. Some people think he faked the injury. Some are going as far as accusing him of ducking Manny Pacquiao. And I'm not comfortable with the latter. I'm a little bit more settled on the former. I don't think this is an according to Hoyle outright duck, but I do think that there's more going on here than meets the eye. There could be.
Errol Spence's eye.
Faking an injury to get out of a fight can occur for a few reasons. It doesn't necessarily have to be because the fighter is avoiding a fight so much as delaying it. You know, if Manny Pacquiao beats Yordenis Ugas, and there are a lot of people out there that think he can, Errol can always fight him afterwards.
We go a little deeper in the rabbit hole.
Perhaps there will be some clandestine attempt to ensure that Manny Pacquiao emerges the victor this upcoming weekend, to ensure that he makes it to the Errol Spence Jr. fight, the Errol Spence Jr. pay-per-view, which will be a bigger pay-per-view as a result of it, if it happens that way. Bernard Hopkins knows this is a dirty business, and sometimes guys fake injuries for various reasons, but it happens. There was just a story reported by Mike Coppinger not but a few hours ago that Charles Conwell, under the instruction of David McWater,
He faked a hand injury.
he was supposed to fight Ivan Galoob, and, he faked the injury because the price was too low. As stated, there are various reasons to fake an injury to pull out of a fight. Sometimes it's the price. I don't really think that applies here with Errol Spence Jr. and Manny Pacquiao. I think Errol Spence would be paid handsomely, but he could make that much more money later on down the line if they can delay the fight. It could be that way, or it could be that, Errol Spence Jr. really did get injured because there were rumors and rumblings that he was getting touched up in sparring, and maybe that's where the injury originated, and they just delayed announcing it.
Maybe they were trying to work out the situation.
Errol Spence Jr. more time to get a second opinion, maybe a third. Errol did say he saw 3 eye doctors in reference to this thing.
24 hours.
Maybe it wasn't actually in 24 hours. Maybe it was in the days leading up to that eventual announcement that Errol was going to be pulling out, and maybe they delayed in making that announcement because they wanted more time to garner more buys. Before the announcement was made, the pay-per-view itself was already available for purchase.
So maybe they were a bit slow with the news.
Nothing would surprise me, and it's because the more you know about this business and you listen to the stories, you start to realize that the news is fluid, ever-changing, and almost anything is possible.
It's not outside the realm of possibility he faked the injury.
So all kinds of stories about guys manufacturing injuries to pull out of fights, and the reasons might change, but yeah, it does happen. And it's entirely possible that that's what's going on here, because to a lot of people, there are far too many pieces moving on the board. They know that this is a very critical year for the PBC. They also know that the PBC does stand to benefit from getting too many Pacquiao pay-per-views instead of just one, and that might be reason enough to have Spence pull out, have Ugas stand in his place. Bernard also talked about quality assurance for the fans. That Errol Spence Jr., maybe this guy should produce an x-ray. Prove to the fans that what he's saying is true.
Because the fans have been stood up.
It's the feeling these days, especially in the American boxing scene. It's very difficult to be a boxing fan these days. It's very hard to muster up any excitement for what's going on when most of what you hear about is what's not going on.